Hello everyone. So I want to make this series of videos to discuss, let's say, my thoughts. It could be stuff that I've learned from others, by reading, through direct experience, or any source really. It doesn't really matter what the source is. What matters is, I guess, if something is useful, potentially if it's true, assuming that we can know if something is true or not. Maybe we can experience certain things, or they can appear logical, or if we spend a lot of time thinking about them, they never eventually contradict themselves. I just want to share thoughts that maybe I wish I had learned before, that were the result of basically a lot of either research or trial and error. So one of the first thoughts I want to share, actually the first one, is something that has now become really one of my core assumptions. In anything I think, ideas, theories, anything really, I always try to see if it relates to this basic idea. And it's a very simple idea, and I think most powerful ideas are simple. I think we can also call them principles. This is it's not from me. It's the guy that wrote the book Principle, Ray Dalio, I think. I didn't read the book, but I've watched a few videos about it. And he described the idea of principle as some sort of like super robust rule. So it's more than a rule. It's robust, intended as something that even if you make many changes in the parameters or in the environment, it will still be there. It's difficult to change. So there are things that sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, according to certain parameters, according to the environment, etc., etc. But there are other things that they kind of always work. Those are principles. So this idea, I think it's one of my key principles. And I'm just going to explain it very briefly and then I will comment on it. The idea is, it's like you can imagine everything in 3 steps. Step 1 is everything appears to be noise. So the person that is just starting in something, whatever the field is, will have the impression that everything is kind of random. It's like, it's meaningless, it's very chaotic, it's not orderly, it's pure disorder, pure randomness, pure chaos. And this is phase 1, like everything is noise as opposed to signal. So phase 1, everything appears to be noise. Phase 2, you start to learn some rules, you start to learn the ropes, you start to learn how things work. And now you think everything is signal. So you think everything is perfectly controlled, perfectly understandable, makes perfect sense, is always logical, follows a specific process. There is no chaos, it's just pure order. That's step 2. So now you go from complete ignorance in phase 1 to complete overconfidence in phase 2. You think you have understood everything. You know everything. So before everything was noise, now everything is signal. And so what is the third step? The third step is then you realize, after you start to notice that all those things that you thought were signal actually were not. You basically were just lucky when they worked almost all the time. The conclusion you reach in stage 3, it's almost always noise. So it's very similar to phase 1, but there is a small difference. But that small difference makes a huge difference. And it's almost exclusively noise. There is almost no signal. But this almost makes all the difference. So it's not really that there is no signal, there is just a little bit of signal. There is almost no signal. And this is probably true, I think, for almost everything in life. I think it's a core assumption, it's a core starting point that one can use to kind of build theories, to understand other things, like let's say, for example, about people. So one starts to recognize certain patterns in people and to start to make judgments. Initially, they think people are completely unpredictable. Then they think people are completely predictable. And then eventually they say people are almost always unpredictable, but there are some small pieces of predictability, like the signal. Or in investing, initially people say the markets are just completely random. Then they say, no, actually, it makes perfect sense, technical analysis, blah, 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 blah. They think everything is easy and predictable. Then, of course, it starts to fail. They realize it almost never works. Eventually, they say, actually, in investing, just like in everything else, it's almost exclusively noise and there is very little signal. Or in creating a company, a business, someone say, wow, this guy is so smart, he just created this business. So initially they say he's just lucky. Then they say, oh, no, it's just because he's good. So first they believe it's pure luck, then they believe it's pure skill, and then they realize it's mostly luck with a little bit of skill. But the skill is still important. It makes all the difference. But it's important to realize that it's almost exclusively noise. So the amount of signal is very, very low. And so this is kind of the initial theory. It's kind of after many, many years of thinking, I think this thing is maybe the lowest common denominator of all my thinking. So in some way, every other idea, every other theory, everything else, I can just step back and go back to this same assumption. So I can reconstruct the thinking backwards all the way to this initial assumption, I think, for almost everything, but maybe not everything, let's say almost everything. And I think it's very useful to remember that when something has happened in a specific way, it doesn't really mean that it had to go this way. There was a lot of chance at play. There was a lot of luck involved. But it was not pure luck. It was not exclusively luck. Life is not a game of wait and see and say, anyway, it's just luck. But then most decisions, even if they are right, they will not necessarily lead to the desired outcome because there are so many variables, there are just so many things that can happen. There is just so much noise that is going to interfere with those decisions. So we can see noise as an interference. So the signal is what we try to control through our decisions, through our actions, or in general, the part that is not interference. But in some way, beside that, certain things we could qualify as just pure noise. But let's imagine that every single person on earth is operating through their decisions and their actions to signal to the world. But 10 billion signals that all mix together, they become noise. Now, they don't become exclusively noise. It's not that there is only noise and nothing else. But most of those signals from all those people end up becoming noise. And so the question is our signal going to make it? Is it going to survive as signal? Or is it just going to be dissolved in the noise? And that, of course, it depends on the quality of our signal. And that maybe is the part we can control to some extent, is the skill part, maybe. But it also depends a lot on what the noise that is going to interfere with it looks like. So in some way, you can be sending the right signal, but then it's just going to be eaten up by some interference that just happen to consume this signal. Or you can send some signal and for some reason it will manage to go through the interference. But that depends mostly on what the interference looks like rather than what the signal looks like. So again, we go back to the idea that it's mostly noise, it's almost exclusively noise, but there is a little bit of signal. And I think it's just so important to try to remember this for everything that happens. So it's worth trying to do something, it's worth trying to take decisions, it's worth thinking about stuff because that produces signal. It's not worth abandoning and giving up just because it doesn't work, because it may just have been the wrong noise, the wrong signal, but the end result was that this signal just didn't make it. But that could very well be because the way the noise was configured, it just erased that signal. So maybe one has to send many signals before one signal can make it true. And of course, the other idea of saying it's all just noise, so it's not worth doing anything, is kind of stupid. Just accepting that everything is blind luck is also wrong. There is a saying which says like luck favors the prepared mind. It's not exactly the same, but there are some similarities. So it's like it kind of say that the best you can do is be prepared, and then you have to wait for the luck. But the more you are prepared, the more chances you have to receive luck. But the chance is unpredictable. Also, some people say that luck does not exist, or they say you create your own luck. I would not agree with that. And the reason is this, because it depends how you define luck. And I will define luck by just saying luck is whatever is outside of your control. Now, anyone that believes that everything is in their control is, of course, a fool. It's completely ridiculous to believe that everything is in one's control. Clearly, there have to be things that are outside of one's control. And usually they do matter. They have a significant impact. And those are what we call luck. And in some way, most things by definition are outside of our control. The majority of things are outside of our control, and that's luck, which we can also call noise. And the things that are in our control are the signal. But it's a very small component. But it still exists. It's not zero. So there is a little bit of signal, but at the end of the day, it's almost, and almost is the most important keyword in that sentence. There is almost exclusively noise, just a little bit of signal. And this is important. So when we look at our actions, when we want to judge our actions, I think it's very important to remember this. When we look at other people's actions, it's also very important to remember this. It's very important not to fool ourselves and believe that everything is pure luck. Usually when something good happens to someone else, we just say it's just luck. Or when something bad happens to us, we say it's just bad luck. Usually when it's about others, they're lucky, and it's about us, we are unlucky. But the skill also is important. So it's important to recognize that there is some skill in things that have succeeded and in things that have failed. So when we do something that has failed, there may very well have been good signal there. It just failed. And actually, when we do something that succeeds, there could very well have been no signal and just luck. And the same for someone else. So this is the first video, and I will make hopefully a lot more. But I think every idea in some way can be connected to this initial assumption, to this initial idea. So let's see.